Hey RATBAGGERS, it's Jade. Today a quick ultimate guide to the cattle that you can find in Core Keeper. It's such a complex game with everything you can do, base building, crafting and of course exploring and taking on bosses, but there is also cattle farming. There was one new creature added as part 1.0. The drops that you get from these cattle passively can give you a leg up in armor protection as well as crafting a lot of items too. So let's cover everything you need to know about cattle in Core Keeper. So the meadows are going to be probably the first real sub-biome you'll come across, as there's a lot of them situated in the dirt, and it means that you'll be able to find the Moolins and the Bambucks pretty easily. It's a very golden edged area, pretty nice to actually build a base in if you wanted to, or at least take some of the materials back and build your own. Anywho, some meadow milk which you get from the Moolins, it gives a 23% increase in your armour. Now, unlike a lot of foods that have same stats or do the same job, it's usually the highest one that actually takes hold. They don't really stack. The meadow's milk actually stacks with stone skin, the other potion that you can actually make yourself, so you can give yourself quite a big armor boost by drinking both. Stone skin still gives you more protection, but combined it can give you a massive boost even if it's only for 1 minute. And then we've got Bambucks, which drop wool. Now, wool's really common, you find it in a ton of chests as you explore. But you will need it if you want to go ahead and craft the loom, where you can craft a lot of the cosmetic outfits that you can wear on top of your armour. It's things like the chef's hat and the chef's apron. But you do also need it for certain armour sets like the Scarlet set as well as the Octarine bag, and you also need it for one of the go-karts. So for the Kpol, you're going to need to head over to the Sunken Sea and you'll basically find it all in and around the coasts. I always find these guys a bit tougher to get hold of than some of the other cattle. Obviously there's not as much land, and when you do get across some of the land, a lot of it is going to be beaches, so maybe that's why. What you put in with these guys is what you get out. Them little pieces of kelp that you come across that only give one food, never throw them away as it's the only thing they eat. Give them enough food and they'll drop a kelp dumpling which gives you 21 food. The main benefits are increasing your yield when you harvest by 15% and a 15% chance of getting double the amount of fish while fishing. Strolly can be found in the Desert of Beginnings and the Forgotten Ruins. These little crustaceans eat any kind of bugs except glow bugs, and you need quite a few of these to go ahead and craft some of the late game armours like the Galaxite and Solarite armours. You also need it for one of the go-karts and the drums in the musical set, plus the Scarlet Shell backpack, so probably more of a use there. And then we've got the Dodos, which you can find all over the Aesios wilderness, as well as the Desert of Beginnings. These guys drop Dodo eggs, and obviously you can cook with them, but eating them raw will give you 4.3 health every second for 20 seconds and 10 food. But obviously making sure you cook them, the main benefit of these is it gives a big percentage in that actual extra healing you get from health over time for 10 minutes. 25% plus increasing up to 38 food when you go ahead and cook it. So if you know you're going to be taking a lot of hits but you've got plenty of potions to deal with taking on a boss, you might want to actually have one of these as well, as you'll gain more healing from it. Now all of that stuff that they drop is passive, and I'm going to talk to you about how you gain that. But the last thing we'll talk about here is if you go ahead and kill these creatures, you've got a chance of getting marbled meat. You gain 2.6 health every second for 20 seconds, 34 food and 13.3 damage for 10 minutes when you cook it. So use it with something that maybe gets extra critical hit chances, and yeah, you've got a winner. So if you found some on your travels, you can get back to them. You're going to need a livestock workbench. This can be crafted at the normal workbench, and then within it you can craft a leash, the feeding tray, as well as a cage. The cages are a one-time use. The leashes you should be able to use over time again. And obviously the feeding tray is how you're going to be able to feed them with 3 slots for different food. Cattle transport boxes do cost a bit of iron, and that's probably what stops you from maybe getting a ton of cattle early on, but I definitely recommend putting some points into it to get at least a pair of each creature. If you've grown rather attached to your farmyard animals, you can go ahead and name them as well, and you can put the animals in almost any enclosure as long as it's safe, because other creatures will attack them pretty much. So make sure you put a good fence, and I would suggest a moat as well, just in case you've got any of them mushroom dudes who can go ahead and destroy your fence. Put a feeding tray down, fill it up with their favourite foods, and after a while they'll start producing. You need 2 pieces of food to give you 1 drop. So if you want 50 of the Moolin milk, you're going to have to put in 100 of any grown crop. Including mushrooms, they will also eat them too. So yeah, grab whatever you got the most of, peppers, heartberries, whatever it is, put them in the feeding tray. That goes the same for the Bambucks with their wool, any type of farmable plant, and you'll get the same result. For Strolly and the Dodos, you are going to need critters, so worms that you find in and around dirt and any other kind of bug except glow bugs. So a top tip here, make sure in your game settings, which you can change on console as well, don't squish bugs. You might notice that you pretty much step on them and they'll be brown bread, or you can actually turn that off in the game settings. So it makes it an easier way to gather them with your net. They do tend to eat through these quite a lot, so you do have to do a good amount of gathering of the bugs. Also got a good chance of, I think it's the black beetles that spawn when you chop wood with a drill, so that's another good way to get some early bugs instead of going everywhere else. As mentioned earlier, the Kpol need kelp, and you can find that when you fish in any of the waters, which will give unique different drops of kelp in their respective biomes. So never eat any of the kelp you come across, although look out for rainbow kelp, a super rare version that actually gives a lot of benefits for you, but otherwise kelp is going to be for your kelpals. So that's what I give, as long as you make sure you got them fed. How do you breed them though, so you got more chance of getting more resources? You do need to keep them pretty close together. As said, you need at least 2 of them, and they need to eat 30 times each before they will actually breed, and they've got to be standing close to each other. So I would suggest you make sure you always keep them in smaller pens. So if you're trying to make a battery farm, you could give them a little bit of space. I think the size that I've done here is pretty good, but yeah, you could probably enclose them even smaller if you wanted. The baby versions of these creatures will need to eat 8 times before they actually grow up. Now, being totally honest, you don't necessarily need tons of these creatures. Yes, you will need certain resources like wool and the Strolly plates to go ahead and make some armor and other things, but after that you probably won't need it ever again. Obviously the Dodo eggs and the kelp dumplings are really good for buffs, but the rest of the stuff, it sells pretty bad as well, at only 1 coin each, except for the kelp dumplings, which sell at 6. Given there's so many meadows in the dirt, usually when you start off, unless you're really unlucky, you probably won't run out of the meadow milk either. In fact, if you make a good beeline for some of them areas after a while, you'll pick up tons of meadow milk and wool as you go. So I would focus on the Dodos, get as many of them as you can, and obviously make sure you've got plenty of bugs, worms and critters to feed them. And the kelp dumplings are a nice little bonus if you're going to be doing a lot of farming or planning a lot of fishing. Now, cattle boxes are one-time use, so they will disappear once you've deployed them into their biome, so you will maybe need the leash if you want to drag them out somewhere. And the feeding trays, they can be placed anywhere. The creatures will pretty much eat from either side, even though it does say arrows facing one direction. There might be some methods where you can auto-dump certain resources into some of these boxes, but otherwise you're probably going to have to just remember to come back and feed them. That's why obviously you should probably fill up the free slots with extra crops that you've already got. And yeah, dump any bugs you found inside the feeding chests. You can mix and match the creatures as well. They don't have to be separated, but I'm just showing you the different pens that I built and dragging them through just to illustrate how you want to get them if you want to breed. And they won't die if you don't feed them. So if you run out of bugs, don't panic. You just simply won't get any resources back from them. They could take a few hits as well, so if they're being a bit stubborn, you can give them a wallop and then drag them on the leash. And last tip, especially with the kelp, obviously, is go ahead and go through the sunken sea and look out for any of the golden kelp that actually grows on the water. Grab some of this and it should give you quite a large amount of sun kelp, which will be easier to go ahead and feed them. And there we go, that's my top tips, ultimate guide to cattle in Core Keeper. If you found this useful, let me know. Go and check out some of my other guides I've already made. Make sure you subscribe. I'll see you ratbags later.